Yo, what's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Group Up Podcast. With me, as always, is my friend and co host, Freedo, down in the bottom side of the screen. And joining us today, very thankful to have Junkrat legend, Apex God, and currently one of Valorant's forerunners, PVPX. PvP, thank you for joining us.
Hey, I appreciate reaching out, man. It should be fun talking about Overwatch and Valorant today.
Defected,
Awesome.
defected. Is that the right word? Overwatch players, I guess. Like, what do they call it when you're in a group therapy session? I guess that's what we're doing here.
Oh,
I think.
disaffected, you mean?
Yeah, disaffected. There you go.
There we go. That's the one. That is us. That is us at the moment.
I
So,
still play
yes.
though.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah, we're not giving up. We're not giving up Overwatch. Don't worry, guys. But certainly, we've got some time to talk about Valorant today. So let's not waste any time and get right into it, guys. First of all, let's just talk Valorant on its own. What do you think of the game? I know you both are really enjoying it right now, so I'll let you gush for a little bit. Go on, Valorant. Give us your thoughts.
Let PvP go first, being the guest.
I'm very addicted to Valorant. It's been a little since I've played a game that's focused on competitiveness, just raw competitive balance, and it's just so high skill, high reward. And I also never played CS, so me enjoying learning how to play a tactical shooter is really fun. It's completely different from Overwatch, and it's been a really fun grind for the past couple weeks.
I would essentially agree. I haven't been grinding it nearly as much as PvP. I kind of go in spurts because I still have to make Overwatch content. But I will say that it's sort of everything I've ever wanted out of a game because I loved CS before Overwatch. We played that as a friend group for like years. The guys from the channel and the Your Overwatch team, and plus an extended friend group as well. And and then Overwatch came out. It kind of itched the Quake vibes that I loved back in the day. Quake is a big shooter for me, but going back into the round based tactical gameplay is what I'm really excited about. Everyone really gushes about the gunplay, and maybe I'm just like the biggest nerd in the world, but what I get excited about is the tactics of rounds and utility, and this game has a lot of that. So even in CS, there's a huge amount of depth with how you play rounds, just like where you put your smokes and flashes, but also just how you move through the map, right? Like maybe you on defense you stack one lane and just rush, right? Or people normally split and sort of just hide and play defensively and play solo, but there's a lot of like ways you can manipulate the map, in even just CS, but Valorant takes it to a whole nother level where there's different abilities interacting, which sort of amplifies that effect. And I have a lot more to say about that, but that's where my passion is in like because back in the day when I played, it was an IGL, as you might guess, being the strategy focused type guy, and that's what I'm really excited about with Valorant. And I think we're really going to see that as the game develops, and it's at like 10% capacity at the moment as people learn it, and that's kind of evidenced by like the devs smacking former pros and streamers, right? Where they just don't know the game well enough, and nobody does, frankly, which is what makes this so exciting. Oh, you're muted.
Oops, I was muted. Yes, I just caught it, thankfully. Yeah, like actually, that's my initial reaction as well. Because somebody who has like a zero FPS background, basically bar Overwatch, my initial reaction was like, "Man, this game is too shooty. I'm not really feeling it. I suck hard. I'm getting my ass handed to me. I don't know about this one." So I played it on the day of release. Didn't play it again for like 4 or 5 days, and then a group of the mods on my Discord server were like, "Hey, let's go play some Valorant." And so we've actually five stacked, and the game was like 10 times different. It's
Oh
similar
yeah.
in similar like with Overwatch, where playing solo queue versus playing the actual game with a full stack is just like two different experiences. And actually playing in a 5v5 with like actual tactics of actually, like pushing certain sides, holding certain sides, using your abilities in a coordinated way, it was just much better, much different game. And I was actually like, okay, I can play this thing. This I can play, and that's definitely how I felt. PvP, who have you been grinding with? Because I know you've been playing pretty nonstop.
I've been trying to play with as many people as possible, to be honest. I haven't played with like anyone consistently. I've just been playing with a lot of Apex people as I come from Apex. Also, I've been playing with a lot of Overwatch people who have been trying out Valorant as well that I haven't been able to play with in a little bit, and meeting a lot of new people. I actually got to play with like Ninja and and Pokimane and stuff for the first time. So I thought that was pretty awesome. Meeting a lot
That's
of
very cool.
content creators from other games. That's one of the cool things about Valorant is it's bringing people from every single game, like League and CS and Overwatch, and it's just anyone and everyone has been trying it. So you're meeting a lot of new and different people.
Yeah, that brings an interesting point of discussion, which is kind of what I wanted to lead on to at some point, and that seems like a good point as any, which is it has seen an influx, Valorant, of a lot of players from a lot of different games, and in particular, since we are Overwatch lovers here, or some formerly, um, it has brought a lot of tier two Overwatch players in particular, and there's anyone who's been following on social media will have seen a spree of twit longers of people declaring that they're retiring from Overwatch and done with that game, moving on to Valorant. So why do you guys think that Valorant is so appealing to so many people, and why do you think so many people are particularly shifting away from Overwatch towards Valorant?
Do you want to go first?
That's an easy answer. This is like such a T-ball question, but any new game, everyone knows there's a space to grow in every capacity, whether you're a pro. I mean, we're seeing way more content creation as well for this game than I even remember with Overwatch. Like there was a hype around it, but I feel like there's 20 or 30 even just in the YouTube space, content creators that are making guides and stuff. And it's refreshing and exciting because in Overwatch, it's sort of like a wasteland where there's only a few that even really attempt to like break in to the community. So it's fun to me to sort of be able to be in both worlds where there's just a lot of energy in trying to discuss or teach or learn or the game. And so in the tier two space, to the question, is the same thing where they're just like trying to hop on the new thing and get in there. Typically, though, the sad thing for many of these is that a lot of these guys are journeymen in the way that they just sort of bounce to game to game to game, and the actual best players kind of come up in that second wave where just like in early Overwatch days, there was a lot of Quake or Team Fortress 2 players, and most of them have been kind of cycled out where the actual Overwatch players have solidified. And the same thing's going to happen with this, where yeah, some former CS pros are going to have early success for sure and maybe get some prize money. It's definitely worth their time to go into it. But as the like actual masters of the game develop, they'll eventually, like in a year at least, will kind of replace them. I think is pretty well understood to be the case.
Mm-hmm. We're actually seeing some tier one players moving from Overwatch to Valorant. I'm sure we'll see some more big names in the future. Probably soon future. But the thing is with Valorant is just the raw competitiveness of it. I think Overwatch fell a little bit short with their balance decisions or lack of over the past couple of years, and I think a lot of competitive players are they've been really wanting a game that is focused on, you know what, I'm gonna get this good and I'm gonna get rewarded for being this good, and my impact as an individual is gonna be super important, and that's definitely driving a lot of pro players, and there's a lot of casuals too because this is a new type of game. Even though it's similar to CS, right? But CS is so old. Coming from someone that never played CS, I came from console. I went to Overwatch. I never wanted to try CS because it was just so old, and I was like, "What's the point of me trying this? Everyone's already good at this, and it's not really like there's no content really. It's just it's just a shooter game." But Valorant did a really good job of bringing in new people that might want to try this tactical shooter type game for casuals, and then obviously competitive players that are trying to advance into the pro level. This is a huge opportunity and a new space to try and reach it. And then even pro players that are bored of their current game might want to just transfer over and see what they can do with a game they have passion for.
Yeah, so it's kind of two themes emerging there. One being, the freshness and the chance for a new beginning, essentially, whether you're a content creator or a player, chance to really be on an even level playing field, I guess. Because like you said, PvP with Counter-Strike, it was like, well, why start now? There's like people who've been playing this game for 10, 15 years who are way ahead of me. And it's just like the amount of effort it would take to get on level with them is, pointless, essentially. It would be way too much work. And probably impossible, really, just to be able to catch up in that space of time. Whereas now everybody's on a level playing field, so everybody can go again. And then also the other theme that you kind of touched on there was a disenchantment with Overwatch, like unhappiness with the directions they've taken in terms of particularly competitive integrity, which is interesting because actually I saw the Riot devs made a post earlier today about competitive integrity and what their plans were for the future of pro Valorant. And they were saying, we value competitive integrity over everything else. We want this game to grow organically. We're not going to rush to any decisions about whether it should be a league or whatever franchises. We want to see the game grow organically. We're just going to fund tournaments. We're going to fund content creators, and then we'll see where it goes. Which in the past, Freedo and we've both talked about the inorganicness of Overwatch, of how they've kind of shut down a lot of tier 2. The franchising Overwatch League has kind of damaged potentially the normal growth, the grassroots growth. So yeah, what do you think is sort of the lesson that Valorant might be taking from what Overwatch did?
I think Freedo probably has a way better answer for Overwatch than I do. I wasn't really in the pro side of Overwatch very early on, as I came from console, and I didn't really focus on like the pro scene or anything like that. I was more focused on just streaming and content. But I can answer from the Apex perspective, maybe.
Yeah, go
I
for
think
it.
Overwatch organic growth was okay. Like they had was it early on they had like the Apex series or whatever. Never really paid attention too much to it, but I know like it did have a healthy scene. Whereas Apex scene was definitely super forced, where they just threw money and at big tournaments, and they're just like, here, we have esports. Where Overwatch did kind of build up, it built up a healthy fan base, which did lead into Overwatch League. But then Overwatch League kind of, I feel like maybe it wasn't managed too well, especially supporting their tier 2 scene. I feel like it was really hard for tier 2 players to financially support themselves. And also on top of that, like the balance decisions made, it was just really hard for people to have passion to want to keep grinding to eventually make it into Overwatch League if it was even possible. And I don't think we've actually seen a lot of tier 2 players make it into Overwatch League since the initial wave of signings, but I could be wrong on that. I feel like Freedo definitely would have a way better answer than me on that one.
Yeah, I'd say I think it's pretty interesting the past year or two. When did Apex come out? Was it last year? Like in the middle of the year? I'm trying to
Yeah, it was
remember.
about a year.
Like
It was like February of last year.
Okay, right at the start. The time flies when you're having fun, but I think we've seen a progression in the way developers have been approaching things. When Apex dropped, if you remember, it was kind of revolutionary in the way that there was no marketing really, and they pulled streamers in to help balance the game. They asked Shroud what he thinks, right, and paid Ninja to play it on stream. That was kind of revolutionary, and I feel Riot has sort of picked up the baton in that regard, where they're almost running the test of what if we listened to what every influencer has been saying about games for the past 5 years or something like that, right? They're sort of going at each one you can think of, whether it's like the inorganic growth of the tier 2 scene in Overwatch League or the Overwatch scene, I guess. Basically every esports professional that I can think of said that it was a mistake to essentially create a vacuum in that competitive structure by making it either hard or inefficient, or they can't really earn a good living by doing tier 2 tournaments in Overwatch, which I think kind of stunted that growth. Whereas Riot's like, oh, we're going to learn from that and just let it develop naturally and with a good scale. Where that is kind of what happened with Riot League of Legends, where it grew pretty rapidly, but then they took control of it. So that's like the right order of things, where it does suck then all of a sudden when the big company then owns everything and you can't compete. There's definite downsides to that, but I think either with their own experience running league and then creating a franchise league now, or just watching how Overwatch developed and has mixed results. There's times where it looks like it's going up, and right now I think it's at a down point. The dust has yet to be settled, and it's definitely difficult for Overwatch to compete viewership wise when there's just Valorant right there with a free game, essentially a beta key just for watching it. So like I think there's a inflated viewership for Valorant right now, and we'll have to kind of see how that settles down, right? Like even the Apex viewership was amazing for the first month or so, and then it sort of became a normal game like the rest of them after a bit of time. And I'm interested to see where Valorant falls in that. Like it weighs highly in my heart. Like I think it's an amazing game. I think it's like the future of CS, essentially updated and kind of modernized in a lot of ways, whether it's like just looking at it. I mean, people talk about the graphics being bad, but compared to CS, I think they look great. And how the depth of strategy and the gunplay is all there. And frankly, nobody really talks about it with CS, but CS has a lot of CS:GO specifically has a lot of mechanics that aren't very popular that Valorant fixed, and I could go into depth with that. But like just in general, Valorant is like plays and feels better in the hands. You know, when you're controlling weapons and stuff. There's CS:GO is more of a spray game, whereas Source was much more like Valorant, where like there's wall banging, there's you know the first early parts of your spray were more where the kills were gained, whereas in CS:GO there's a lot more like spraying deep into a clip and shot inaccuracy that kind of removes the power level of the gunfights there. If I'm getting too abstract, stop me.
Well, no, no.
This
We'll.
is making
I
sense to
think.
someone. I know you guys haven't played CS, but
I think we
Oh,
will definitely. Oh, go PvP. Go ahead.
okay. I just want to talk about like sustainability of players. I want to talk about Apex a little bit just because I played I was a pro player for Apex, and unfortunately in Apex Legends, uh, all of the tier one orgs are leaving. They've already left. Cloud9 left a long time ago. Um, there's no support for the esports orgs, and the problem is when you don't have support for orgs, you can't have support for players because that's the main financial stability of players, which allows people to grind unless they just have no uh, financial worries or they just they have no expenses, which isn't reliable. Like people have
Mm.
bills, they need to have financial support. That's one of the nice things about Overwatch is they do have Overwatch League where you have contracts and you have sustainability, but the problem is it Overwatch League feels a little bit forced in its current state, and we're kind of seeing how them moving from Twitch to YouTube is kind of questionable. Um, and I hope Valorant takes notes from this and they said they want to focus on organic growth. I think the best way to do that is definitely support orgs, and they've already said that they want to do that. And supporting orgs allows players to focus on the grind. They have income coming. They're not going to be stressed. They can actually continue to grind the game with no worries, and eventually, hopefully, lead into a league where they have a lot more sustainability. And it's just a win situation for everyone. Like you have content people love to watch. Players are making a healthy wage for playing, putting hours in, and you know Riot's winning too as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, Frida, I think we'll definitely get into the like gameplays of Valorant and CS:GO and Overwatch and possibly even Apex as well, PvP. So we'll talk about the actual how the gameplay compares. But yeah, for now, while we're talking about the more macro elements, I think we will have to see how obviously it develops with Valorant, how the hype, whether it continues, dies down, reaches a stable point or not. That nobody can really predict accurately. What I think is interesting though, and we kind of have touched on it, but the amount of hype that I've seen content creators have for Valorant is unique. I think when Apex came around, I think there was obviously a lot of hype, but I think the community was hyped, and therefore content creators are part of a community, and they were also hyped. For me, just my outside looking in perspective, it seems like Valorant has had a very heavy content creator driven hype. I haven't necessarily felt so much that like the Overwatch community is clamoring like in our arms like Valorant is the game we're going to shift to, but the high like the up top down has definitely felt like the people who really invest time in esports and gaming, they're really sold on Valorant. And obviously I guess this goes back to the idea of competitive integrity. They've done right from the start. They made all the noises about we're gonna make sure cheating is impossible, we're gonna make sure that like the ping issues are really good, make sure your like accuracy is really good, everything that pro players care about. They've been very vocal. And in previous group ups, Frida, we've talked about how Overwatch shied away from the top-down balancing philosophy. Like they kind of care as much about the casual player as they do about the pro player. Like the casual player needs to have as much fun playing Brig as the pro player needs to have dealing with her. And we've always said that that's probably the more popular decision long term in terms of growth for communities. But is it possible that Valorant is kind of showing another way where actually focusing on the top down, getting the content creators and the pro players invested first and foremost, actually is generating a lot of hype that's causing then the community who follow these people, and we call them influencers for a reason, right? Is that causing enough of an effect that we are actually seeing the game be popular despite its sort of almost inaccessibility in terms of this is a hard game, it's for really good players and you have to get good?
I think Valorant has done a really good job of showing that they've given solutions to all the problems that every other game has, which is bringing in a lot of people. For example, myself, like a huge reason I love Valorant is because just the raw competitiveness, balance, high skill, high reward, like I've said a couple times already. But I think people don't need, we shouldn't overlook that there are flaws that will come in the future. I think people are definitely in a honeymoon phase with Valorant. The game will be toxic. Let's be real. In a month or 2 or 3 months, when you try and queue up competitive or whenever competitive releases, people will reach a phase where it's going to be toxic. You're going to have teammates that are toxic. It's just how competitive games are. Also, with the addition of the character Raze, the newest one with the rockets and the grenades, I think that's their first real test to be like, okay, how do we want this game? Are we actually going to say, are we actually going to balance competitively, or are we going to keep this character how it is? Because right now, it's not very healthy for the game. Like shooting a rocket, killing 3 people, while also being midair and booping yourself back. You can't even kill the person for a trade. That's going to be the first like Brigitte test that Valorant is going to have to face, and hopefully they manage that correctly. Because if they don't, then I think a lot of people will definitely lose faith in how the direction that Valorant is going to go in.
Hmm. What was your original question, SVB? Can you remind me? I'm an old man.
Just about whether the top-down philosophy that Riot have taken with Valorant
Right.
is that actually going to be
Well,
more successful than we thought?
yeah, the word success is relative, right? Where you got to remember, even at 1.6 million concurrents or however high it went, I think 1.7 maybe it was the peak, breaking records. That is still only a fraction of gamers as a whole. I mean, Overwatch sold 40 million copies last I checked, and it's probably higher since that point. Maybe add another 5 or 10 to that number. If maybe it was that high, they would have announced it again. But just to show you like how how wide a game like that goes, and the comparison that it's really helped me restructure how I think about Overwatch as a game is that it's much closer to Call of Duty, another Activision property, than it is to CS:GO or League of Legends for that matter. It seems like Blizzard and Riot go at each other, but they really don't. Like like the game maybe Riot is definitely going at the type of properties that Blizzard makes, but as far as the philosophy goes, it's much more akin to what Valve does in terms of like the who it's for, basically who the audience is. And if you're a hardcore gamer that is on Twitch, you watch a lot of games, that it's made for you, right? The whole Valorant game, and this is sort of what PvP was saying, it's sort of my way to rephrase it, and I kind of alluded to it earlier as well. It's made for hardcore players and influencers. It's just doing everything that they've ever asked for, right? But what's interesting to me as someone who like it's sort of a weird thing to say, but I sort of study the casual mindset of players in Overwatch. They hate so many things about this game, just absolutely hate it, and they will never be interested in it. And there's a lot of players that won't because they don't want that learning curve barrier to entry to access all of the things that we appreciate. I mean, I love it, but it's a very rewarding game. It's not a just straight up fun game. Whereas if you're bad at Overwatch, you can just jump in and have fun on a character you like. It's just like plug and play, right? Like whichever playstyle you like, you just jump in. Whereas Valorant, until you jump on that learning curve, I mean, you literally can go 0 and 30 in a game, right? Or however, 24 rounds, I guess, or
No
25
matter
if
which
there's a
character you
tie.
pick.
Right? Like if you don't know how to stop before you know how to stop and shoot properly, you just can't even enter the game. Whereas in Overwatch, if you're bad at Lucio, you can stand around your team and at least do something, right? Like it's totally different in terms of how you can get into the game and the types of players that are into it because of that. So that's not to diminish the success level of Valorant. It's just sort of I'm just trying to like
Yeah.
identify what players are where, because I think influencers, content creators, and people in our space oftentimes get tunnel visioned on people surrounding us, and because we don't hear from the masses that vote with their dollars, and don't say anything or aren't even on Twitch, right? Like how many gamers don't even watch Twitch or have never seen Twitch? There's a lot of them. Same thing with gaming content on YouTube, and that's sort of the divide there. um that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree because like even for example take my own whatever small sample size I have speaking to the people who are like following my YouTube channel, I've been trying to poll them and ask them questions, how they feel about Valorant, things like that. Most of them don't care basically, because they're and almost vehemently so. Like they're just like actively already like, no, everything about this game looks exactly what I didn't want in a game, which is that it's too hard, it's too focused on raw mechanics, and what basically drew them to Overwatch is the antithesis of what they like or what they find in Valorant. Essentially, it's not what they want, but which, as you alluded to, is like you you can always do something worthwhile in Overwatch. And also, I think with the team elements, and again, we might get into this more detail later, but um, in Overwatch, you can contribute to your team and have like an effect on the game that way, and you can rely on your team a lot more easily just by the choice of your character. Whereas in Valorant, it's like, yeah, your character might be helpful in the team setup, but if you don't know exactly what to do, your character will pretty much be a dead weight. You're like an active burden, and your team will probably flame you for being an active burden. And you can, of course, be a burden in Overwatch as well, but like we said, just existing as Lucio and just having your aura on, you will do something. Or even if you're a really bad Reinhardt, but at least you're holding your shield up, your 1500 HP shield will do something for you.
You always can swap to an easier hero as well, right? Like, even if you're doing nothing, there's like easier options usually in Overwatch. Whereas, I mean, you're locked in for the whole game in Valorant for one, but also there's just no escaping the gun mechanics. End of the day, no, you got to come in contact with the FPS elements of it.
I think talking about this a little bit might also point out that maybe Valorant esports could be really successful because it's going to be a lot easier to watch than watching Overwatch. The average person that has never played Overwatch is going to look at it, like look at Overwatch League or look at a tournament and be like, whoa, I'm looking at rainbows right now. I don't even know what is going on. Like if I asked my brother that's not a gamer to watch Overwatch, he would be like, what is going on right now? But if I asked him to watch Valorant, he's going to be like, wow, that guy's insane. He just clicked 3 heads and he helped his team a lot. Whereas you don't really see that with Overwatch unless you're watching like a McCree player or a Widow player. But if you're watching like I don't know, Moira player, and you just see like yellow mist going out, you're like, okay, I don't know what he's doing. Like maybe he made a really good play with his team, but I have no idea.
You're like, last time that mist was purple. What's going on now?
Yeah, it's going through walls. Like I don't know. I see a hamster rolling around. What's going on?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The diffuse game type is just too good for esports. Like it's OP for esports broadcasting because it has lulls in action, which Overwatch doesn't have. It's just like 10 seconds to regroup and then you're back at craziness again, right? You need to be like Uber shouts speaking in rap god mode to keep up with what's going on. Whereas diffuse as a game mode has those ebbs and flows where some rounds actually don't matter. It's like, oh, they're saving and like they're just gonna lose unless something wacky happens. But in between those times, you can talk about tactics and there's spikes of tension and there's sort of ebbs and flows with it and scenarios. That's what gets me excited about it the most, where the bomb's down in a bad spot, like you're 1v3, how do you clutch it in that situation? Like there's just infinite scenario permutations of the game of how you're supposed to play in each setup, and then challenges for the player to rise to the occasion to surprise you, right? There's a lot of surprise in the game where things happen unexpectedly quite often, like just baked into the system. So because of that, there's just a lot of opportunities for cool things to happen, and that just makes for an amazing esport.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Very punishing if you're not good though, and you don't know how to do all those things. But it has that level of depth that I do want to at some point talk about Overwatch a bit more in this way, but I think Overwatch is making a turn for the better, but it's a bit too little too late at the moment. Like they need to wrap up the pace of it and keep going down the lane to steer the ship towards competition. But I mean, my sort of one sentence thesis is that I think Overwatch shouldn't have added a ranked mode, and like it's basically a quick play and type game, and that's what it does best, and it hasn't it's leaned towards trying to be taken seriously in the competitive integrity aspect, and they've made a lot of good decisions, but in comparison to like the entire game of Valorant being built from the ground up for that purpose, it's like hard to compete, right? Like everything's relative, obviously. Like if I think Overwatch is in a much better space in terms of competitive integrity than it was like in a year of goats, for example. But
Yeah.
like my cam is going crazy and it's freaking me out. Your tolerance as a player base for those things shifts over time, right? So it's like from the dev's perspective, they might be like, well, we've done all these great things and have improved it. It's like, yeah, but we also sat through so our patience level is so much lower now for our willingness to accept these things. And when there's a new hotness, a lot of people are just gonna switch over.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah. Go on, PB.
I don't know if you guys saw the, I mean, obviously you probably saw, but the new experimental announcement that they announced, how they are planning on taking action at the amount of CC in the game, and that they're going to try in the experimental mode, like a massive nerf across the board for CC and see like a new direction that the game could potentially go, which I think is really good because we've been asking them to test things for 3 years. And especially with the release of Overwatch 2 coming out, next year, beginning of next year or something, or end of this year. I think them testing things now could really give them a good answer for how they want to redirect Overwatch for Overwatch 2 or revamp the game. Because Overwatch 2 will definitely bring people back to try it. There's no answer if they'll actually stay. I think a huge flaw of Overwatch is the content release of how they've been releasing like one character on map, and it's been like every 3 months, and then it goes into PTR off the announcement. People stop caring about the hype, and then it goes into live server, and it's like, oh, okay. But Overwatch 2 is definitely going to be a huge hype wave of be like, oh wow, there's a bunch of new characters, maps, new game mode, and wow, they changed the direction of the game. They're going to rebalance and stuff. So maybe I really want to go back and start playing this again, and it'd be a good tipping
Yeah.
point for Overwatch.
Yeah, this is
Definitely.
something we've kind of touched on in the group up call a couple of times, which is that, well, as an Overwatch-based content creator and Freedo as well, like we're kind of desperately hoping that Overwatch 2 kind of does save the community a little bit. It is pretty much, I think, the final chance. And to your point, Freedo, I think it is like almost like a bad partner who messed up one too many times. That's what kind of Overwatch is, where you're like, nope, no, I trusted you once, and you cheated on me. So this is your last shot. Like this is your last chance. If you do it again, it's done. So whereas previously, I think we put up with a lot of crap. I think obviously one, the jadedness that people have gotten over first goats, and then even no matter how brief the double shield meta was, again, because our tolerance had been so lowered by goats, everybody was instantly like, oh my god, this game is horrible. It feels crap to play. This meta is horrible. We need rapid changes. And now with new games coming out, which are the attractive, to continue my metaphor, they're the attractive single person who's hitting on you. Valorant is here like, hey baby, come here, I won't mistreat you. Like I got all the good stuff. Like I'm gonna treat you right. And that allure is kind of again causing people to really question whether they care about Overwatch as much as they once did, essentially. And yeah, again, like Freedo, the more this is a bit maybe of a hot take, but the more I think about Overwatch recently, the more I'm like, yeah, it should just never have been a pro game. It should just never have been an esport.
At least not right away, right?
Yeah.
And I don't even think it's a debatable point as well. Like I've some people have given me heat on this, responding to things I've said in this way, but their actions in the recent year prove that it wasn't ready. Like because if it was, then why would we have to radically change everything, right? Why is 132 even on the table? Why did we need roll queue in 222? Why do we need a huge balance rework if it all was good? Like obviously it's not good and they needed to change it. So an example to me that I think just makes this like cut and dry in terms of like the format and competitive integrity of the game and the fundamentals of what the philosophy even is, because up until like that year ago, it felt like there was no philosophy, and it was just like we made some stuff. Good luck. Like it was just sort of that. That's how the game felt, where it's all over the place. Where if you compare, you take something that is like easy or noob friendly or cheap, in Valorant, like a shotgun hiding in a corner. Okay, it like the judge is pretty good.
My go-to strat.
The Bucky's pretty good. I like using them because they're cheap. They're good eco weapons. You can trade up. There's a lot of cool tactics you can do with them. But there's a hard limit to what it can do. As soon as you're out in the open and there's any other gun looking at you, you're dead, right? It's like a one and done thing. It has limits. It's like confined in this space of the game. Like that's what that shotgun does. In comparison, you get people clamoring for Reaper buffs, and when they came around, when Reaper and May were getting buffed, I feel like I was the only person saying like, wait a second. Like, I know there's like things you want to answer, but do you know the ramifications of making something like May freeze and Reaper's cooldowns insane? Do you know what's going to happen? Because you're not going to like it when it finally reaches its final form. And it took a while for that to catch up, because turns out Goats was even worse than those things. But then there's multiple layers of problems that they've been cascading down to try to solve step by step, right? Like they did so many wrong things at once that the single steps they were taking weren't good enough. They needed like 10 steps down to fully come to the point now where I think Overwatch is in a decent spot balance wise, but how long did it take from that point when all those decisions were obviously bad building up to it? But in comparison though, and this is the problem with Overwatch's design, in my opinion, Reaper has to compete for one slot on the team. It's not like in a diffuse game type with an economy system where maybe there's a position I can play or a type of round where this weapon is good, or there's no reason to really have that variety. It's just game modes, maps, that changes it up a bit, counters a little bit, but I'm going to keep bringing up Call of Duty probably in this call, but it's a similar problem that like Call of Duty has, where there's 5 options at rifle or SMG or whatever, and usually 1.5 are the best. It's just that simple, right? They're without a system, a competitive system to sort of figure that out, whether it be bans, whether it be economy, whatever it is, right? There's no reason to go into that next thing, competitively speaking. Like, and to think that it could, I think fundamentally misunderstands how competitive games work, right? Let's like, there's a 1% advantage. Well, it gets 90% of the playtime. That's always how it's been in every esport game ever. And it feels to me like Blizzard has been learning some of these lessons through Overwatch that everybody knew this whole time, right? Well, why can Riot come out and make Valorant and have this long list of things that everybody always says, and then do it right, and then we say, oh yeah, that works, actually that's exactly what we said, and it has the effect that we said it would. It in science, if you can predict something, it means the hypothesis is true, right? And that's how I feel about all those philosophies that most people don't debate on, right? Like, how many times have we been at BlizzCon and like a group of us will be we're talking about the game and we'll all say the same thing, generally speaking, like plus or minus like 1 or 2 points, right? Like we hardly ever disagree on things,
with no communication from Blizzard about any of it.
Right. And it just seems like they're trying to improve these things, so I don't want to get too mad about it, but
yeah,
it is just frustrating that, like, I don't feel any pride of like, oh, I told you so. Like, that doesn't make me feel any better, but that, like, it does get frustrating when those things add up over time, and it gets acted as if this is a surprise that it doesn't work. Let's put it that way. Like, it shouldn't have been a surprise that
I agree.
rank didn't work without roll queue, right? Like, that shouldn't have been a surprise, or the balance, or anything.
Yeah, I agree. There's a huge like lack of versatility when it comes to like power levels in Overwatch. The Apex had the same problems where you find a gun and you just pick that gun up because of the power level. You don't pick it up because of the versatility. Like, oh man, maybe in this situation I could use this instead of that. It's just you pick that up because it's the best. It's kind of the same in Overwatch with the stale metas that we had for the years, where you just use that character because that was the best. And in Valorant, they do a really good job with the guns where there is different power levels of buying guns with the economy, but you can buy underpowered or lower cost guns depend on the versatility of how you want to play for a situation, which is really, really nice. Another thing I wanted to talk about was communication from the companies, Blizzard or compared to Valorant. Valorant isn't even released yet. We played the alpha for 3 days before release. We've been playing the beta for a week, and I've already met and talked to over 30 developers. It's insane. I could DM them and they will answer me within, a day. I could, if I asked them, they'd probably join me on a video call and talk to me and hear my feedback and give me direct answers. I've talked to 2, if that, developers for Overwatch. I can't even, and one of them was a social media manager. Like, I don't even know, like, I know Freedo, you've done meetings with them, maybe more for content than I guess for actual them listening. I feel like maybe
no.
yeah, but like my point is, like, I played that game for 3 years, 10 hours a day, and I feel like I couldn't even voice my frustrations and then be like, oh, okay, maybe you're right. We're gonna look at that. We're gonna listen. We might not make a decision right away, but we're listening. And like not like feel like you're talking to a wall is the most
Mhm.
annoying thing ever as someone who takes games very passionately and competitively, which Riot has clearly stated that they want to do. They want to communicate with the community, and they've already proven that in the beta. Hopefully, they continue to do that during the release of Valorant.
Yeah, I think that's kind
Yeah,
of the crux of it.
I
We
have a
have to
lot to
see where
say,
they
and I
go.
probably shouldn't say a lot of it.
Say some of it.
um, I mean, there's a big difference in the way these things get handled when like a very important gamer question gets asked about like power creep, and then it gets just completely dismissed and literally saying we don't think it's a problem, but then all the actions they take after that is to nerf it out of existence. It's sort of weird. It's like it feels like one hand doesn't know what the other hand's doing, and there's disagreement there, and you never really know what they're thinking. Whereas Riot's the complete opposite, where I agree with everything PvP said, but they also have the what's the right phrase? Courage of their convictions or whatever, right? Where as you brought up, Raze is very controversial in the game. I think
Mhm.
she's not very good, like as in if you were making a competitive 5-stack team, like I don't think she's like super high on the tier list, but she's
Yeah.
obnoxious and like gets free
Mhm.
kills and is kind of lame in a way. So that makes a very sticky debate. But like the character design guy, I think directly responded to many of the influencers who have said this and like, well, we'll take a look. Like, this is what we think. Like, just tell me what your design is, right? Just tell me like this is our goal. Like it feels a little disingenuous where they're like, all the utility is not to kill. Basically, they said it's to accent the gunplay, and then they have a character that's all about killing you with a few buttons. I
She
think
has
that
like 6 different ways of killing you.
Yeah.
right, and that does feel weird, but again, having an open dialogue about that, and it's okay for us to disagree. It's just a video game after all. That's leaps and bounds better than the world where Blizzard feels like they're in PR damage control mode all the time. Like they can never say anything essentially because they don't want to get called out for it. And part of that is the
That's true.
community's fault as well. I mean, obviously,
Mhm.
community members like me or just the gamers as being entitled children. I'm definitely in that camp. But Riot, I feel, has a much more mature relationship with that, uh, typical gamer reaction to things and just being honest about it. Where I
Yeah.
with Blizzard, I couldn't tell you what their design philosophy was, other than it's a quick play game, right? That's why I say it's like COD, right? It's more like, oh, I can pick up and play and get into the things I like out of it. It's not built to work at a high level competitively necessarily, which is just evidenced when they
Yeah.
say things like its ranked mode is for relaxing after work. I mean, can you imagine Riot saying that about this game? Oh, ranked mode, chill out with that. Like ranked mode it's for chilling after work. No, ranked mode is about getting destroyed or destroying your opponents. One of the two. That's it. It's about destruction, conquest. It's not about hanging out at all. Go play the other modes for that. In fact, we don't even know if we're gonna make other modes for hanging out. I think Valorant could do that, right? They should probably get like a gun game and deathmatch and things like that, but that's not even a priority for them. Whereas I feel in Overwatch, those things were the priority, right? Like they came out with the 3v3 game modes and the workshop and all these other arcadey things, which are great. I think that's where Overwatch competes with Valorant, because you can't even enjoy Valorant in that way at all. But that isn't like a Twitch game, right? That isn't like an esport game. The
Mm.
competitive integrity, none of those words jive with the fun based philosophy of Overwatch, because I do think
Mhm.
Overwatch is a more fun game, but Valorant is a more rewarding game, or more challenging game.
I think Overwatch is one of the best casual games to ever come out in the past like 10 years at least that I've played.
Right.
I don't think there's any arguing that for sure. But Valorant definitely did a really good job of tackling or attacking the competitive scene, as we see the tier 2 scene for Overwatch probably crumbling if it hasn't already crumbled. But I'll let you get into another topic if you want to.
No, sure,
I've
yeah.
spoken
No, I was
enough.
just,
I'll let you go.
well, yeah. I was just gonna say, like, I pretty much completely agree. Like, as some, I love Blizzard. Let me start by saying that, like, I have since pretty much the start of my gaming life always played Blizzard games. So I'm not, when I sit here and I criticize Blizzard, I'm not sitting here with like, oh, I hate Blizzard. Blizzard is shit, or I feel like a lot of people actually who have either are still part of the Overwatch community or have left the Overwatch community seem to actively root against it. You know, like they're kind of like enjoy the watching it burn almost. I don't know, like some sort of vindictive pleasure. I'm a little bit confused by that, but what I'm trying to say is I want Overwatch to succeed, and yet when we discuss all these things, the same kind of theme emerges, which is the kind of arrogance of Blizzard almost, where these aren't things that are like we've been like people like us have been saying these things for a long time, and it's not like rocket science. All these things that we've been saying, like, hey Blizzard, could you try focusing on this? No, it's fine. Or like, hey Blizzard, this is boring, and then Blizzard comes along and is like, no, we know better. It's the classic you think you want it but you don't. That kind of, I think, personifies Blizzard in one. If there was ever one incident that personified Blizzard, it was you think you want it but you don't. Because I think Blizzard are amazing at making great games and terrible at turning them into esports. Yeah.
Sorry, the only reason why I want to say is because there might be somebody watching that doesn't know what that's even from. That was a question at a Blizzard Q&A asking for a WoW Classic to emerge, and the now president of the company responded in saying, "You think you want it, but you don't," because of all the problems. And WoW Classic was a much grindier game, and lo and behold, they went out and made it. And for all the reasons why they thought people wouldn't like it, is exactly why people did like it. That's the crazy thing. And sorry, I would
no, it's good. Yeah,
Overwatch
it's good to provide
would do a
that
similar thing. I mean, right? If they had a similar philosophy of like, ranked mode should feel challenging, not casual. That's what I want. And I think a lot of people agree with that. Though the casuals don't, or they think the casuals don't, and that's sort of the sticky situation, right?
We could look at Overwatch 2 as almost like Overwatch's classic that they could have an opportunity to release. I never played WoW Classic. I played Wrath of the Lich King and Cataclysm, which is a couple expansions later. And I went back and played Classic, and I had a lot of fun. And I would probably still be playing it today if I wasn't a full-time streamer that was addicted to FPS games and spends all my time playing Overwatch and Valorant. But yeah, I agree. Like, Overwatch 2, their competitive direction for that game could be amazing. It could be like their WoW Classic release, which gets a lot of people to come back and enjoy.
Yeah, I'm hyped for it, especially when they're doing all these experiments. Like, it's in the right direction, right? Like, putting barriers down, putting stuns down. Like, design the game to be about what you want it to be, Blizzard. That's what I'm asking of them, essentially. Like, you tell us, and I think too much up to this point was them just sort of creating things and letting the garden grow on its own, weeds and all. And that's been the problem, where they just expect the community to somehow, form balanced team comps on your own without role queue. Just do that. It's like, well, that doesn't work, right? like you need to develop it more. It's weird. Blizzard is like, there's certain things they don't want to develop, and then other things it feels like they overdevelop. But so yeah, toning down the stuns and sort of reworking that. It'll be interesting what they do. We don't know what the changes are specifically, but a lot of characters will probably need like massive reworks. Like, what's the world where how is Brigitte or Doomfist or whatever other stuns, how are those characters good if they don't have powerful stuns? It'll be interesting to see what they change with that. But I think it's a good idea anyway.
Yeah.
I just want to mention real quick, one of the things that Valorant did is they made a lot of the characters very similar. There's like 4 different characters that have smokes. They just work a little bit differently. I think a lot of the Overwatch characters are just so drastically different, and they're afraid to make things similar. Whereas they could, maybe look at the reworks and be like, okay, maybe we could make Brig similar to Lucio, just a little bit different. Like she could do this, like maybe for this situation, like she could have speed boost for a team just like Lucio has, but maybe but weaker, and then maybe the way she attacks is a little bit different. So it's just versatility options that could be much more focused on competitive balance. Whereas I absolutely love how in Valorant, like a lot of different characters have thermite-esque abilities. Like Viper has her poison field, Brimstone has his thermite, Phoenix has thermite. 4 to 5 different characters have smokes. They just work, different timings, different projectiles of them. It's just all different, but the same at the same time.
Yeah, and again, this is like goes back to the same, like this is something that people have been saying. Like it feels like almost everything that Blizzard is adamant about not changing, they eventually change. Going back to like when the game first came out, they were like, no, we're really adamant that everybody should be able to play 6 traces if they want to. That's core to the Overwatch gameplay experience. And then they were like, no, actually, this is better. This is better. Yeah, this is definitely better.
6 divas for stall.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Oh, God.
And then they were like, "Oh no, we're really adamant that you can play whatever comp you want. 222 is not necessary. Like it is core to the Overwatch experience that you play whatever you want." And then they're like, "Oh, wait, actually no, we needed 222." And now I feel like the ability overlap is the next hill that they'll die on eventually, which is like, I believe they recently said, nope, we don't want ability Overwatch. We want every character to feel unique essentially, and then eventually they're going to realize, nope, actually having characters that do roughly similar things is really good for the game, because then there isn't like one character that everybody has to pick, or like one character that's so OP that if the enemy team picks it, you have no choice but to mirror it, and that's like it completely dominates the game. And yeah, and the irony of all of this is that Blizzard made the greatest esport of all time, which is StarCraft 2. They literally, or StarCraft in general, the franchise, they pretty much birthed esports in general, and yet they haven't like peeked over into the other desk. I don't know how the Blizzard offices work. They haven't peeked over to the other department and said, "Hey guys, do you think you could help us in designing an esport? Because we're kind of struggling since we made you." But okay, I think we
Blizzard's totally different since that era, though, dude. That's the thing. That's why I relate it to COD now. Overwatch is like old school Blizzard, but updated into the Call of Duty world with the Activision Blizzard merger. I think that's the way that like it just any question you have about the game, it's like, well, why don't they do this or why don't they do that? Remember that that's like what the game actually is. And those of us who are come from the esport background, remembering StarCraft, like that's not that's only part of that's like the inspiration for Overwatch where it comes from, but that's not like where it lives and what it actually is. It could change into that, sure, if that's where they want to go long term, but we're still on that road of transforming it to hopefully like be a better version of itself in that regard anyway.
That should be a meme. It should be like, any question you have, Activision is the answer. But okay, we whined about that aspect of Overwatch for I think enough time. Let's talk the actual gameplays of the game. So let's talk for someone who's maybe watching who doesn't have a beta key, doesn't really know what Valorant is going to play like, and whether it's a game for them. What is sort of the comparison between pure, like in terms of when you play the game, Valorant v Overwatch v Apex and Counter-Strike? Like what are the differences that you should expect?
So I think one of the biggest questions we all get is like, I play Overwatch, I want to try Valorant. Does it compare, or are my skills going to transfer? And I feel like the best answer is definitely no. But the thing is, like, there are little things like ability usage and overall teamwork, and depending on the characters you played in Overwatch, if you played McCree, for example, I think that is definitely going to help you a lot, because it's a very, you have to shoot him in the head and you have to flick. But if you played other characters like Mercy, it definitely isn't going to transfer. Other games I can't really speak for, like Rainbow Six. Apex I can kind of speak for. I did come from Apex, and I feel like a lot of the things that I did in Apex definitely hurt me in Valorant, like crouch spamming and moving while shooting and shooting the body, because it's a very high time to kill game, whereas Valorant is a very low time to kill game. You just shoot them in the head and they die in 1-2 hits generally. Yeah, I'll let Freedo jump in on this.
I just want to expand on that for a second, just so anybody who doesn't understand. In Valorant, if you move while you shoot, your gun will spread like nuts, and it will, even if your crosshair looks like it's on a person, it will not hit that person if you're moving. And that's like something I've really struggled with as well playing, because like I said, my only FPS background is Overwatch, and I'm moving all the time. In Overwatch, it's like if you stop for a second, even Apex, I've played a lot of Apex as well. If you stop moving, you're dead. Whereas in Valorant, it's like, please stop moving when you shoot, because you're not going to hit anything. And just to finish it up, when you get shot, it actively hinders your movement as well. So if you start getting hit, you're just going to like freeze up in spot, so you can't really escape. Yeah.
One of the when you get hit by something.
One of the things I've had the realization of over the past week of me just grinding is, in other games I would aim with my movement a little bit, which is good. It's not a bad thing. And in Valorant, if you aim with your movement, you can't rely on it, because if you get shot, you get stopped, and then you'll try to like compensate with your movement, but you're not actually moving. So definitely, it's a very slow stop, shoot them in the head, flick with your mouse type game.
Yeah, the difference that I would say to understand these mechanics, I agree with PvP completely that there's almost no transferable skills from Overwatch. It's just a completely different game, where whether it's the gunplay or the way the rounds work, Overwatch has objectives, regrouping, you play together. It's just completely different. The diffuse game type is about map control and gunfights and setting them up with the utility. That's the core of the game. But Overwatch gets a lot of flack for being like easy FPS wise, which I don't think is accurate at all. The hardest mechanics of the game are like as hard as any game ever, maybe the hardest of some of them. In terms of like, Genji's double jumping behind you, like, hitting that shot, or some of the epic Taimu shots over his career that he's hit. That's among the hardest shots that are possible. But
we're all
Tracer and
thinking of the
Widowmaker.
we're all thinking of the bunny example, aren't we? With the flick
right
on
on
Dorado.
Dorado. Yep.
Playing Tracer and at the top level in Overwatch is very, very difficult. I think in
Right.
some cases way easier than any level of Valorant that you could really compare.
But it's not even comparable, right? So
but it's also not comparable. Yes, yeah.
No game plays like Tracer. That's one of the cool things about Overwatch is all these characters. Somehow there's like some semblance of balance. Like it's not perfectly balanced or competitively balanced necessarily, but like it works essentially. You just watch Kabaji play Tracer or something and just get shocked while he clowns on people, spinning around them in circles. Like
you watch him play Echo and turn into Tracer.
yeah, full spot 5 things. Anyway, in Counter-Strike type games or in Valorant, in order to make the gunplay harder, your weapon doesn't go where the crosshair is, except for like the first 2 shots. Like it's disconnected. It's sort of like you're aiming the weapon, but the weapon moves irrespective of the crosshair, and that makes the gunplay inherently very challenging. A lot of people ask like, well, why would they do that? Well, it's because like if you play COD or Apex or whatever, and the bullets go right where you're aiming, it's a way easier to control. It's just way more user friendly. That's very good on consoles like Halo. I believe the players in that don't like bloom, like don't like the randomness, I believe. But like there's aim assist, very floaty, it sticks to things. And Overwatch in that same way, it works well on a controller because of that, because things go exactly where you're aiming them. Whereas in Valorant, what you have to learn to do is disconnect your concentration from your crosshair after you start spraying. So the first few shots, you want to aim for the head and burst 2 to 3 bullets. But after that, and you're spraying, you have to like look at where your spread's going and concentrate on that. Like I think a lot of people, they assume that like people are actually aiming at the feet. You can kind of do that sometimes, but really you should be looking at the spray bullets, the bullet tracers,
and knowing when to stop shooting. Sometimes it's not good to just keep continually shooting, and you want to reset your shot.
Than CS:GO, because CS:GO has a set spray pattern every time. It deviates a little bit, but it generally goes in the same way for the whole clip, basically. Whereas in this game, after 5 shots, it goes RNG, which means, like PvP said, you pretty much just shouldn't keep spraying. Actually, to be honest, in this game, you should be resetting and firing controlled shots. But that's how that works.
So yeah, already for anyone listening who doesn't play
hitboxes
FPS
are smaller.
games.
Sorry, that's the difference. Whereas Overwatch, there's like various different hitbox types, and you got a 180 behind you and stuff. This game is much slower. You likely want a lower sensitivity, as low as you probably can handle, in order to like have perfect crosshair placement as you're moving through the map, and then have very tight, accurate control. It's a very precise game, whereas Overwatch is a very fast game.
Yeah, it's also nice all the characters are the same hitbox size. That was one of my biggest complaints in Apex, and they tackled that issue so weirdly, where they made some characters take increased damage and some characters take decreased damage, and it was just like, what is going on? Why are they doing that? And Overwatch, I wouldn't say it's a flaw in Overwatch that characters have different hitbox sizes, but it's definitely really nice that Valorant doesn't have different hitbox sizes. It's more on an equal playing field. Like, I had a discussion on my stream today about why I think CS:GO is so popular and is still, and why Valorant will succeed, is because it's most closely related to a real sport than a lot of other games. Like if you watch football or hockey, there's no content updates to football or hockey. The game is balanced. It's just, it is what it is. Like CS:GO and the Valorant, they're just balanced shooters. It's great for esports. But like a game like Overwatch, it's very hard to manage in that aspect.
Yeah. I mean, do you want to expand on that point, or just get into it?
It'll be interesting to see what direction Overwatch wants to go, sort of maturing into its, I would say final form, but almost like first form of actual competitive integrity. Like they're like walking into figuring out what that is and what that means. Like how much shields should there be? How much teamwork should be required? How much can these characters pop off? What should the difference level be between easy characters and hard characters? Like those debates are kind of still going on to move us towards competitive integrity. Overwatch, no matter what, always is going to have a strong MOBA component that's like competing up against the shooter aspects of it, which makes it tricky because they
It's definitely a
don't
challenge for them.
right. Because like either Reaper is dumb, in my opinion. Like I think he clowns on lower ranks too. This a lot of times I think people say like you're just focusing on the high end of things. But what happens is in order for a character like Reaper or Torb or Symmetra or whatever to work at higher tiers, they have to be busted and just kind of dumb for the average level of play. And then like the whole game is about them for average players, which I think is backwards. I think like they should feel niche, but it would also be nice if the rest of the game was developed to kind of promote those niche playstyles where it just isn't complicated enough as a game. So the decision you have to make is, well, do we just see Genji, Tracer, McCree, Widow all the time? A lot of people would be happy if that was the case. Like that's I think what a lot of hardcore players want. But the more like casual diversity of gameplay seeking people might not be satisfied with that. So it's a tricky situation. I would like for them to have actually more complex game formats and whether it's like the game mode itself, it doesn't look like they're moving in that direction anytime soon, or hero bans. Obviously, that's like the easiest way to actually do it. Hero pools, I think, has been a interesting experiment. I don't know if we have time to talk about that, but I think it is again like the baby steps of what it really needs, which is a ban system
Yeah.
to promote
And,
diversity properly.
and to sort of meld your points together, essentially what PvP is talking about is that a game that's ready and competitively like it has competitive integrity doesn't need radical changes. Again, something you mentioned earlier as well, Freedo. So like the example PvP gave, like most pros, like real athletic sports, aren't seeing radical shifts in the format of their play. Like they do have very minor balance patches. So like I don't know American football, but certainly soccer, or regular football as us Europeans would call it, has like from time to time there's like minor rule changes. They might like they might have technology put in, and now we can officiate certain decisions like this, or a small tweak to how a certain rule works. But the core game remains the same. So what we're saying is we're waiting for Overwatch to reach a point of a core game, like Dota or
Point.
yeah, like Dota or StarCraft. They're not suddenly changing their format all of a sudden overnight. You might still see balance patches because they realize that one thing became a little bit overtuned or something. But what is the base format of Overwatch? I guess that's what PvP you were alluding to. Is that correct?
Yeah, basically, it's like one of the big reasons why um, Rocket League esports is so popular. Like, I wouldn't say Rocket League is the most popular game in the world. I could be wrong on that, but I don't feel like it doesn't have like the most insane amount of players. But their esports scene does incredibly well because the structure of the competitive format is just a very simple take. It's just, there's a ball and there's cars, and that's how it is. It's just like a regular sport. It's how you compare a video game to a regular sport. And I feel like games like CS:GO and Valorant are very easy to compare to regular sports because it's, you have guns, you click them in the head, there's utility, and that's about it. There's attacking, defending, and maps. And Overwatch is very hard to like tackle in that scenario because of the drastic differences in characters and abilities, and different game modes, different maps with those game modes. There's just so much going on. It's not just more simplified.
Yeah, it's like the personification of like a game that is like a Pandora's box where like everything opened and everything came out, and there's like 10 problems in 10 different directions. Like even just with the hero designs and the balance patches and all those things, just the game modes themselves often have like really different challenges. So like a King of the Hill map is completely different in how pros play it to how they play a 2CP map. Like the game mode itself is already like adds a huge variance in how the game is going to play out. So yeah, I guess we're essentially waiting.
Could also be a good thing. It could also be a good. It's one of the big reasons why people love Overwatch and esports, and is because it is different. It just depends on how they tackle it at the end of the day.
Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's what we're waiting to see. Freedo, any thoughts on that before we go back to gameplay? Because I don't think we fully discussed the gameplay elements as well, like what someone would expect.
Another gameplay point would be that, and this sort of goes to my rewarding versus fun dichotomy between the two games that we're kind of nested in. Valorant has a lot more boredom in it right? There's a lot more waiting, whether it's in the round because like you shouldn't be peeking. There's just a lot of discipline on when you should even engage, and most of the time you shouldn't, basically. Like, so there's just a lot of downtime, and then you die, and then you're watching your teammates. Whereas Overwatch, it's very responsive and is always giving you feedback, and there's something to do most of the time. There's very, very little downtime, and if you're below plat, you never regroup, and you always have uptime. But so that's a major difference, right? And I think a lot of people, when they watch Valorant gameplay, they're like, oh, this is boring, right? And they don't really get the appeal because it doesn't, like, as an
It's slow
esport,
too.
right? For
With
like a
walking.
casual viewer who just wants to see things pop off, that's, boring. But as an esport viewer who wants to see the tension and the storylines of the different scenarios that can happen based on the different strategies and playstyles you can have, that's you have to be into that to start to enjoy that. And I have more to say about that I'm interested in, but it's kind of changing the subject, so I'll let you
Well,
go.
I'll quickly add to that. Yeah, like I think one of the things I've learned recently is I think one of the things the gamers lack the most, and I don't know how this really reflects on us as a people, but gamers really lack patience, both in their play and also what they watch. So alluding to what you said, like people, whenever I've heard criticisms of both Valorant but also Apex, this is a criticism I heard of Apex a lot, where people were like, it's boring because like a lot of the time they're just doing, like, they're just farming loot or they're just doing nothing. And like again, I had like discussions with people about playing Apex as well, and like one of the things that I never understood in Apex was why like the vast majority of the Apex community insists on dropping in the hottest zone they could potentially find, and turning their own game into like a lottery, and like
Yeah.
like increasing the likelihood that they die by like 10 times because they land with like 8 other squads, and you can't, no matter how good you are, there's a good chance you die there. And the response I always got from people was, well, it's boring, like I'm not gonna play a game and spend 10 minutes looting, like to start with, to build my, to do it tactically. And I think that's the same issue that people will often have in Valorant if you're not someone who's into that kind of the patience for a future reward, right? The patience of like you said, holding an angle because eventually it will pay off. If you're not into that, you're not going to enjoy Valorant at all, or even watching Valorant, because there is going to be a lot of like people being really disciplined and just standing in one spot and staring at one pixel. And in between rounds, you'll be dead a lot. Like again with Apex, where people were like, I hate, like some people just leave when they die because they're like, I can't be bothered to wait for my teammates to res me. Like it's just pointless. So
And there's still no solos.
Exactly.
we've been asking for it for over a year. They told us no. They said it wouldn't be healthy for the game. I'm like, okay, I'm out of here.
Which is again really unusual, right? Because Apex, more than most games, seems like a game built for like a solo mode. Like people play it solo half the time anyways. May as well give it a mode.
Yeah, I mean, I could go on a rant for an hour about how much I'm frustrated by Apex, but I'm not going to do that. But to talk about Valorant, at the very least, at least the rounds in Valorant are short. They're only about like a minute and a half. Actually, I don't know. The direct timer is a minute 45, minute and a half, something.
I think if
2
someone
minutes.
fully plants the bomb, it maybe gets to 3. I can't remember. Like for the bomb to explode, if you did it the last second, I think that's how long the rounds can be.
It's not too long, so you do. Oh, my camera moved up. It's not too long, so like at the very least, you will see action. There's definitely is downtime, but for like Apex as a comparison, sometimes you land, you'll loot, you'll run around for 10 minutes, and you won't even see someone. And then you get to the end game of where the circle finishes, and you die right away without even killing someone, which can it could be really boring playing. But also the esports competitive side of Apex, the best strat is to land, loot in 60 seconds, and then run to the end game and find a building and sit there for 7 circles, which is like 10 minutes. So watching esports professional or Apex professionally is quite boring for sure. But the cool part about Valorant is that the patience definitely pays off almost every single time, no matter what. Even if you're watching someone that dies, one of their teammates that is also alive might have an insane clutch moment that you see. There's up to 25 rounds in Valorant. Every round is always going to be like eating popcorn. Like, what's going to happen this time? There's going to be an intense moment. Is this guy going to pop off in clutch? It isn't really. I wouldn't say it's often where you just see one team just snowball and destroy another team. Like you might see in Overwatch a lot. Like you might see a snowball effect where they just get destroyed. Where in Valorant, I don't feel like there isn't much of a snowball effect. You always have a chance to come back.
Because the
And
rounds
there's also
keep resetting, right? It's not.
they reset. Yep.
And there's a cap to your power level as well in Valorant. Whereas
And you get
in
a bonus for
Overwatch-
losing.
Right. Like there's comeback mechanics built into the rounds in Overwatch. Like you start playing well, then you get an ultimate, which makes it easier to play the next fight. Whereas so Valorant and CS as well has this a bit, but if you one dink someone with the marshal, is it the sheriff? Is it the sheriff?
Yeah, I
Okay,
always
so like
mix
you're
that up
saving,
too. It's the
right?
sheriff.
So
The
like
pistol.
the deagle essentially is what it is,
Yeah.
right? At any round, you can buy this inexpensive gun and kill 2 or 3, and all of a sudden, like save rounds can be pop off rounds as well in this game. So the gap between your power level, whereas in Overwatch you have an ult, like you're super powered, right? You're like 5 times better than a normal mid fight. Whereas a full buy versus eco buy in Valorant, the gap between them isn't as big. Like they're definitely advantaged, but that's those asymmetrical matchups. I think me and SVB, that term, I think, I was going to say something inappropriate. I think at that point, it gets us excited. Let's put it that way. Asymmetrical matchups, and I wanted to talk a bit about the more gameplay differences as well. Where Overwatch, the benefits of it being pick up and play and simple, and you can kind of file in and do your job without too much effort. It helps the casual, but hurts the sort of competitive depth in that it's very easily solved as a game of what you should do. Where whatever hero balance, whatever hero pools that we have, because there's mirror matches and stuff, there's usually one comp that's like clearly better, and then maybe like another alternate play style that you could get to work and under the right conditions. That's usually the maximum of the difference in strategy. And since every game mode, despite assault is different than Koth and blah blah blah, but it's single objective, cap this thing, have a team fight. It's all the same thing. Whereas because the diffuse game type, well, first of all, maps play completely differently. The difference in play style in maps in the diffuse game type is way bigger, I think, than in Overwatch, where they generally
you play by yourself more, or solely.
Right.
You play by yourself.
You can, but like
With communication.
Here's some, and this is something I bring to this conversation, having like years of CS experience, and that I want to explain of the actual depth of this mode that isn't even being tapped into yet. Not only playing it, but I watched the esports scene for a long time. But even in CS:GO, a game that, as you said, is fixed essentially. There was a recent patch, but whatever. Generally, it's like it's not like your goats and then your dive, right? It's not like completely different play styles. That is true, but even in that, over the years I watched, different play styles emerged as being the best. Where there's like very defensive teams that maybe split and are all about utility. Fnatic had an era of dominance doing that. There was like a team called Virtus Pro, which very boomer bust team. They're like they're Polish in their heyday, and when they were really doing well, they had the nickname of the Plow, the Virtus Plow, because they were good at movement and trading with one another. Like they would stack up, go in together, and they're very good at like creating crossfires and trades and that sort of like teamwork, pushing in together. Or there's teams that suck at teamwork and are better at dueling. When Simple is very well known for being the best player in CS ever. Early in his career, he was very toxic and he only could get on bad teams, but he would be like the hyper carry of a team, and they were very good at playing Dust 2 on like Hellraisers, where that's a map that facilitates like splitting off and solo laning, and you just take aim duels, right? And that's sort of how that plays. Some maps are better at big executes, and again, you can have your own philosophy on how you play each one, where different eras of dominance showed us different strategies working. Envious had a period where they just force bought all the time because they had Shocks and Kenny S, I think, at the time. And Shocks is just this amazing player. And Happy's Deagle Ace. If you ever heard the who's the caster who was in Overwatch, he went back to Semler, very very famous clip. That was in the Envious era where they force bought all the time, and you just keep giving him a deagle. You'll eventually get the rounds, and they won a tournament doing that. So my point is, there's all these different play styles in CS, which is a fixed game, so to speak. There is no like one way to approach it, because each round you can have a different philosophy of what you even like doing, what you're effective at doing. There's different contexts. There's a phrase in these types of games where not all frags are created equal, right? Like entry frags are harder because they open space. Exit frags and trash frags that happen at the end of the round when there's no consequence don't amount to as much. And that context builds different tension points of how you play it. And I could speak another hour about this, but that's sort of the big rift between like Overwatch, which is it gets solved in 5 minutes just by looking at the patch notes. Whereas in the diffuse game type, even with no patches or no radical game changes, you can have just the personality of how the rounds play out and how you want to play it based on your strengths come through. This is like a team.
And
Navi was famous for waiting till the last second to rush on T side. They would just wait till the last second and then they explode all their utility. Like there's all sorts of these goofy ways that you can go about playing the rounds.
And again, I think this goes back to what PvP was talking about earlier, which is when a game, it's almost counterintuitive. Like it seems to defy logic, but when a game actually figures out what its end state is, that's when people can actually really come up with really like innovative and different and vibrant strategies. So, let's look at any real, like an athletic sport, whether it be soccer or NFL. It's not like teams all have the same strategy. If you took Overwatch and mirrored it in that same example, every team would play the same strategy all the time, and like just the team that's best at the best strategy would win all the time. But that's not how real sports work. Speaking soccer, there's teams that play counterattack, there's teams that play possession based football, there's teams that just like park the bus and try and take a draw every game that they can because they're shit and they just need to get as many points as they can. And again, in an esport like CS, like you're pointing out, or CS, a game that I know more, StarCraft, people still come up with new strategies all the time, and the game hasn't changed at all for years. Like it's the same units, same 3 races, and people are still coming up with cool new things because actually, again, to finish the point, simplifying a game sometimes makes the strategies more complicated. Like if you give people just a simple, like, this is the game, now do something with it, it's often better than what Overwatch's approach is, I think, which is like constantly let's shift the game. But all that really happens is that people just figure out the best or the strat that's most easily rewarding 90% of the time, and then just play that and grind it. And yeah, that is something, again, maybe Overwatch needs to consider, is what is our end state so that we can actually reach a place where we can get what everyone's been crying out for, which is some uniqueness in the teams that actually play Overwatch. Because right now it's still kind of lacking, other than maybe some of the Chinese teams trying some funky stuff. But
yeah, it's very, very subtle in Overwatch. It's not like the rant I went on where each team literally can play the game entirely differently or have different ways to set up. It's very hard to do that in Overwatch. It's hard to have a personality in the game. You're very beholden to what is best for that flavor of the week. And I don't know League of Legends well enough to comment on how that works out. I know they have some wacky balance too, but I just feel like there's more to it just in the format of Summoner's Rift or the basic MOBA 3-lane structure, where there's, in the same way that CS has rounds, well, the different lanes and the flanking and how you farm up resources, like there's a lot of room there to express yourself, whereas Overwatch in comparison is just too straightforward. And until we have like either a more robust deep ban system or something like that, like I don't necessarily have the go-to answer, but I know the types of things it needs to be for it to like truly evolve. Otherwise, it is like COD. Okay, so I told you I was going to mention COD a lot. In COD, everyone uses the same guns all the time because why wouldn't you? And it's more about how like they play the objective, and that's how I feel Overwatch is, where you'll find out what the best guns are or the best heroes, and then it's more about just you fight on the objective, and it's very simple in that way. Where I don't think it has to be, but maybe if they were to go that hardcore route, they would alienate their casual fans. So I don't really know what they can do without causing damage, right? Hero pools was an attempt in that, and I already think that's caused some damage as well. So yeah, it's tough.
I was talking on my stream today about the versatility of character picks, how it's going to affect gameplay and playstyles in Valorant. My prediction for now, which could always be wrong, is that there's going to be probably 3 characters that are always picked, unless there's just some unique comp that has 5 different random characters that ends up being good together. But I think it's going to be like 3 characters that are always picked, and then there's going to be like one that's leaned on, and then one versatility flex pick. But we'll see how, as people get better and better, how combos end up happening, and also if they do like a pick ban phase, how that's going to really shake things up. I don't know. It should be really fun to watch. So there was a lot of characters that I thought were going to be insanely good, like guaranteed picks, that now I think are like, they're not that great. And then there was some that I thought that were like, I don't think I think they're going to be cheesy, not so good. Like Cypher, for example. I don't know if you guys know Cypher. He's the one that has, for the people that don't know, he has traps and he has a camera that he can set up. He's so insanely good in professional and competitive play because of his informational value, which I didn't really see that at first. I was like, whatever, he'll be cheesy. Pros will be able to destroy his stuff, no problem. But he's really, really good. And I thought Viper was going to be insane. And she's good, but I feel like she's not as insane as I really thought she was going to be.
Right. And it's interesting. And I can't remember if I've said part of this before, but even in CS, in pubs, all the depths of strategy that I got so excited about, oh, you can do all these different things, big executes, different ways of playing the game. I mean, there's rounds in CS where the bomb gets planted and like nobody dies like for a long time, where they're just utility crossing each other and you take space and nothing can be done. Those same types of things are going to happen in Valorant, and I think the information and map control is like the end game of the high level, but it's hard to do that with randoms, right? Like
Yeah.
to some degree in CS, people will know like a couple smokes on a map. And when I say that, I mean like there's spots where you look up to a pixel, line this up, stand here, do this, and sort of like Ononades for Overwatch, right? That's a much bigger component of CS where set positions for utility, cross bouncing it on certain things or across the map in order to smoke off a specific section of the map to take map control. That's like, I don't know, half the game or something. But when you're not an organized team, it's harder to replicate because you only throw one smoke. And if your teammate doesn't know the other one that's required to smoke off Mirage, CT, and jungle, well, you can't really execute. You can't do the strat without both or another smoke even.
Mm.
But in Valorant, they made that much more user friendly. Like there is the high level where there are definitely going to be like mollies you can shoot across the map to get into a doorway or something like that, and that's going to be found out. But it is a lot easier to, like, I mean, Brimstone, I think on a competitive level is probably going to be a must pick, and he's sort of like a sleeper must pick. People don't really think he's that flashy, but his smokes are the best in the game. They're the easiest to land, and they're the strongest just in the vision, how long they last. And there's a difference between like hollow smokes in the game versus filled ones. If it's a hollow smoke, you can walk in it, whereas if it's filled, it's a huge coin flip when you walk in it because like you don't know the distance, or it's not like walking into a room and you're peeking into a room like Omen smokes. You can play inside a bit more, but they don't last very long, and he's just not that great of a character. But I am interested in like the counterplay of some of this utility, which I think is also part of like the end game. A character that everyone thinks is insane is Sage, and I do agree, but some characters that are lower tier kind of counter her. Like Omen and Jet are easily the weakest characters in my opinion, as far as like a team concerned. They're like solo QE, where you can take some duels and play by yourself pretty well in solo queue, but they're not like, they don't dominate the team game like Brimstone does. But they both have ways to outplay her wall and her orb, where they can actually move or jump over it or teleport on top of the wall, and they have weird interactions with that. And I think in the same way with Overwatch, we've all kind of learned they do this, I do, they do X, I do Y, like very, very simply. Like they have Pharah, I go Diva. Like it's just that simple. Like it's the best thing you can do.
I'm happy. Oh, sorry.
Just one last sentence. You'll be able to attack, like right now, Sage plays solo a lot. And I think when people learn how to like Omen and Jet, you could run those two at a solo Sage and beat her. Whereas normally the wall looks insane, where it's just like, well, I get this map now, and it's massively strong. But those weaker characters might have entry points into the metagame in order to outplay that kind of stuff.
Which is really good that's a thing. I think I love that you said
does this yet. I'm just saying that I've
yeah,
never seen
of course,
anybody do this yet.
Yeah,
So
the game isn't developed. The game isn't developed yet, which is really good. Like we're gonna see, like all we've seen so far is some content tournaments where we had streamers play. We haven't really seen the true competitiveness and professionalness and what's gonna happen with how the game is gonna develop professionally. But I love that you said that Jet and Omen were so weak and you did bring up really good counterpoints, how they do well against in scenarios like countering Sage and stuff. I think Omen, although Brimstone is definitely way better overall, I think Omen is a bit underrated because he's so good at burning enemy utility. Because Omen can have like 7, 8 smokes in a round.
True.
Where Brimstone can only have 3. Once you use your 3 smokes, you don't have any more smokes. Omen can smoke immediately twice and have 2 more smokes 30 seconds later or whatever the timer is. And then you could fake a site, burn util, fake another site, burn util, go back to the other site, and still have smokes available. And also Jet is one of those characters where if you have an insane player on Jet,
Yeah.
her strength is so much better than what her kit really offers. Like she can go 1 for 0 and dash out and not allow the other team to trade that kill, which is generally how Valorant is played, where you kill someone, then you get killed by their teammate. Where Jet can deny that with her movement, and an insane person on Jet just
You have to be a
with
carry, yeah. If you're insane,
yeah, you
Jet,
have to be
Jet,
insane.
Jet
Yeah,
is good, but like
yeah.
most players shouldn't play her,
Which-
and they're gonna
Yeah.
want to. But
Which is
Which is-
ironic.
it's the thing.
It's a Tracer. It's kind of really comparable to Tracer. Like Tracer, if you have a bad player or an average player in Tracer, she's not that good. But if you have an insane player, she's just absolutely nutty.
Yeah.
Which would explain why I play Jet all the time and I still suck so hard. Like the irony, irony
You should
being that
never play Jet.
no,
She's definitely
no,
the hardest.
I've,
She's the hardest character in the game for sure.
I've been like, well, that's why I picked her up. I always do that in games. I'm always like, I'm gonna try the hardest character, but then I've been like, the dark side has been calling me, and I'm like, pick Raze. She throws grenades and kills things. Pick her now. And I'm
Yeah.
just like,
C4
yeah.
in with Judge, and they can't shoot you because you're flying through midair.
yeah, I can't deny the temptation to pick the noob tube character is very high, but yeah, but it's already interesting hearing you guys kind of discuss like this, so early into game's life, the sort of subtle differences that eventually inevitably kind of come down to play style, right? It's like you said, a really good Jet will make the character look viable, whereas 9 out of 10 teams want to play a different thing. And again, this is essentially the dream of an esport, right? It's what you want. It's like if someone is good enough for this character, they will make this character look broken, or this hero, or this whatever it is that you're trying to make work. And again, I guess going back to Overwatch, that's theoretically there in the game, and yet it doesn't actually manifest itself in the pro level.
What I'm excited for. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say real quick is that it's gonna be nice to see, but I bet we will see it for sure. Is that you might have a team that plays the 5 bad characters that just work the best together, whereas a
The
team might
Clockwork
pick
Vendetta of
and whereas most people will pick the 5 best characters that work good together, but are gonna get destroyed by the team that utilizes the 5 bad characters that just synergizes the best together with whatever strat they try to build. That will
Right.
happen in this game,
I
which
was
is awesome.
essentially gonna say a very similar thing in that, like I said, the format of diffuse allows for gameplay diversity, even if there isn't character diversity. In CS:GO, it does. I'm really hyped to see teams develop where maybe if you have Simple on your team, you do play Jet, and you just like, because they're when you watch some of the scrims that are happening right now, there's a lot of strategy around getting the best ults, the orbs, or having them diffuse, or sort of like building up your carry, or getting there is an ult economy there to worry about. So I guess that's like one small thing that sort of translates from Overwatch, but not really. But like, I sort of wonder if the game will need a role queue, or if this will be sort of the dream scenario that everyone wanted with Overwatch, where it's like people want of Overwatch that you just kind of can play whatever style you want, and you be very expressive. I think this game will actually have that, where if you are a low gun skill team, well, you're picking all the smokes and Cypher, and you're just hiding and executing, and you're trying to avoid gunfights at every opportunity and just try to take map control with your utility. But if you have Simple, well, maybe you're like setting him up, or right, and he plays Jet or Phoenix or whatever, characters that, like, I wonder, like, the meta might evolve, because we know from Overwatch, right? Like, competitively speaking, the easiest, most reproducible strategy is what's going to get picked in esports. That's how it works. But because Valorant always has that never escaping the gunfight aspect of it to some degree, it's difficult to do that, right? And I don't know yet, but like, I would say that for most players, the duelists are just bad. Like, you probably shouldn't have them until you're actually good. Now, in a matchmaking environment, people play them just because they like them, just like in DPS and Overwatch, which basically DPS and Overwatch do very little to win the game, frankly. In general, they can lose you the game pretty quickly, but they don't like actively win the objective, really. The same kind of thing is going to happen with this, where like a competitive 5-man could just choose to play all the smokes, right? Which I think would like stifle the map and just stop you from having gunfights. Like that's going to be possible until they put role limits in place, and I don't know if that's going to be a problem or not. Like, I'm not sure yet.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Because we
But
want to see the duelists, right? Well, to some degree, or at least diverse.
yeah,
We want to see diverse strategies. I hope it isn't lame in that way where you just like clog up the map with as much visual effects. I hope that's not like the best way to play unanimously. I'm dreaming that like you can enable simple to be a
you
frag
think
machine on Jet, but I don't know for sure.
you think the pick and ban phase, if they do that, which I assume they will be doing that, I don't know, actually know, but do you
They
think
haven't
that would?
confirmed it yet. They've said they are open to the idea, but currently
Mhm.
they want to see, they want to the dust settle. But especially with nobody really knowing how to play yet, like
Yeah, of
you can't
course,
really,
it's
we
too
don't
early
know
on.
anything yet.
But eventually, if it did happen in pick and ban phase, do you think that would be enough to like stop this like the same just smoke thing happening from all the time, or do you think we'll have to depend on like a role queue system to be in place to stop certain metas from just always being the
Well,
best?
the good thing is the maps in Diffuse matter so much more because
They do.
the type of utility you have drastically changes. Like I think like I rate Cypher way higher on Haven, which is the map that has
Mm-hmm.
3 bomb sites, because when you play Haven, the games there's so many different lanes and so many different routes where the traps and camera has a increased effect because having that extra map control over there away from you is just better. Whereas I think on Split, you putting traps down, it's like it's just mid. There's mid and a lane here and a lane there. That's it. Like Split's very
Yeah.
simple. It's almost like a Call of Duty map, really, in that way, where like you just want peak power, and that's where I think like Raze might actually be good. Like Raze is sick against bad players who don't know how to play her or play against her yet, when you don't have the strategy yet. Raze looks sick when you want to just like run around and frag and have fun, but when you actually like properly strategize, she doesn't look very good. But I think on Split she might be, because there's so many spots where you just have to be on the map.
Yeah.
Like there's nowhere to go on Split.
She's really good at taking control during the short term, and in Split is one of those maps where you need to be taking control generally of mid or wherever you're pushing. You should be taking control of that area quickly, and she does a good job of creating space for doing that for sure.
So I don't know if I answered your question, but like usually CS has the map ban or pick and ban, right? Where there's like a map draft is
Yeah.
what it's called. And each team is going to be better at different types of maps, kind of like what I was saying. If you're a frag team, maybe you want the wide open map that allows for that. If you're a set execute team, maybe you want the more complicated map that has spots for your strategies to work. So that might be enough just to see some diversity if they just make different types of maps. And I think that's the reason why we've kind of seen incredibly diverse maps, where the only problem I would say is that there isn't a map yet that punishes what would be called CT rotations. What I mean is, in CS, there's maps that are big enough and there's no teleporters, there's no utility, there's no dashes. So like your decisions on where you put your defenders is very punishing, in the way that like if you decide to put 3 on, there's A and B only for one. If you decide to put
Hmm.
3 over here and they go the other way, well, your time to rotate is going to be like kind of long because the map's big and you needed to. If the map's huge, it's harder to gain control of it. Whereas if the map's smaller, or if there's teleporters or easy access paths back and forth between, you turn around and you're already in the right spot. You know what I mean? That's how the Valorant maps play currently, and that might be an issue. Like I don't know how they want to go about that, but that's just something I noticed. Like teleporters are interesting, but they also mean that you get punished less for being out of position to what the enemy did, because you can instantly be across the map again. Or even on Haven, which has three bombs, you really never have to go on their side. You can if you want to flank, but it takes so long that strategically speaking, you probably should just wait on your side with your Cypher camera, as I do, playing lane.
Yeah.
But so anyway, yeah. Long story short, they can design maps. Map design matters
Yeah.
more than like even Overwatch does, right? Where Overwatch,
Hmm.
the map choices feel like they influence whether stall is good or not. You know what I mean? Like different maps, the stall factor I think raises depending on which one you're on, or that 2CP. It's more about ultimates. Koth I think is a bit more about mid fight, but other than that, it's not as radically different to the strategies that are good.
Yeah. And again, it's interesting to see how all these will pan out. Certainly, this has made me reconsider picking Jet. I'm like, man, that was a bad choice. But
I wish you asked me, dude. I would
I should
never
have
have told you to pick
I should
Jet.
have been like, Freedo, please tell me, and you would have been like, no, definitely, whatever you do, don't pick Jet. But
To be fair, the one of the first competitive tournaments, I don't know if it was like a massive tournament, but a bunch of the Apex pros were playing in it that were good at CS. They won the tournament playing Jet as one of their main picks.
hmm.
Yeah.
And the player who played it, which is Grego, my former teammate on C9,
Nice.
he's a Jet main, and he was saying on Twitter, he's like, I don't know why people are so underestimating Jet. Like her ability to win trades and get out alive is so impactful. Blah blah blah. So like, it is cool to see people winning early tournaments with her and argue that she's viable. And it's good that we can even discuss this in the first place.
Right.
Like it, it's just a very good feeling that we can even discuss the fact that a lot of different characters could be good and could be bad. You don't
It
even know.
depends on the level of play, though. SVB doesn't play
Yep.
shooters. That's why I would say
No,
he can't
exactly.
play shooter.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah, that
For
all
sure,
sounds
yeah.
amazing if you could actually click where you want to click.
Yeah, right. You gotta hit all your
but-
knives straight to the head.
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean, so obviously this is, like I said, this is really interesting, and I think maybe we'll have to reconvene at some point when Valorant is a little bit more mature and we can see how these strategies are developing and what's kind of emerged. But I think sort of just to put a concluding thought on the abilities thing, I think to sum up the difference between Valorant and Overwatch in that final sense is that there's a lot more individual autonomy, I think, in Valorant. Like there's a lot of room to like hide in Overwatch and hide with your character pick as well, whereas Valorant is for the people who enjoy feeling like I am in control of my game. I think a lot of frustrations that Overwatch players have is like, my team's shit and like that's it. Like, that's the be all end all. Like nobody's countering X hero or whatever.
I can't carry when my Ryan dies.
Well, yeah, exactly. Or when you're like, oh well, I healed my Ryan and he's just like feeding, he's inting, he's just like charging in.
Yeah.
Or I'm a Ryan and no one's behind me. So like all these frustrations are, if that's you, well, Valorant might appeal to you, but on the flip side, if you're like me and you can't shoot to save your life, you might need to grab some buddies before you have any fun. And you definitely can't. There's no like crutches. There's no like character that you can pick, and it's like I can get value because I know what I'm doing. I mean, you could do that with smoke, but if no one else is doing it, then it's pointless. So, yeah, wrapping it up then, because I like I said, I would be happy to keep talking, but I know you guys are busy lives and you got things to do. So, wrapping up, let's.
I got a quarantine to get to.
Exactly. The sofa has my name on it, but what I would, let's say, concluding thoughts then would be, one, what are the things that you think Overwatch can learn from the early success or early reception, let's say, rather than success. Success is a kind of loaded term, but early reception to Valorant. What can Overwatch learn from that, and then what can Valorant learn from the mistakes of Overwatch? As a sort of concluding summary thoughts. PvP, you go first.
I think number one is communication for sure, because if you're open-minded to communication, then you're open-minded to being open-minded, I guess. Like, you can hear their thoughts and you can try out different things. Obviously, the number one problem with games is the problems that aren't fixed or at least considered. So communication for sure. That Overwatch can improve on from Valorant. Valorant, I feel like, has done a really good job with that. Valorant improving on from Overwatch. I'm trying to think. They've just done so many good
Well,
things.
as in, you could be like, you might just say, well, Overwatch made this mistake. I hope Valorant doesn't do the same, for example.
Yeah, I mean, I talked about it earlier with the balance decisions of Raze. I don't want them to lean towards the casual side of things, and I feel like Raze is definitely like a go-to pick for just easy kills, and it just feels really frustrating to die to Raze. Whereas other characters, it doesn't really feel as frustrating to die to. I hope they really don't. They just need to listen to the community and just just understand the frustrations and hopefully do the adjustments that they need to do, because that was a huge flaw in Overwatch that they took years and years to act on, is the problems that we were voicing.
Freedo?
Yeah, I'd say that I think Overwatch, and I reserve the right to be wrong with these things. And sometimes I just defer my opinions, because if they know their audience better than we do, then maybe Overwatch being too hardcore isn't what the most of the players that play it want from it. But I personally, at least selfishly, hope that we would get a place where by the time of Overwatch 2 coming out, the game has the competitive integrity that Valorant has to some degree, in terms of like, maybe an example would be in Overwatch, it feels like playing even the most easy characters is valid, right? Competitively speaking, like they want everything to be on an equal playing field, no matter how hard or difficult it is. You can't really have competitive integrity and that at the same time, right? Like Moira, for example, they've tuned her back a bit, but like she shouldn't be like head and shoulders better than Ana just because you choose the right target. Like that's how Moira and Brig kind of feel, and or Reaper or whatever, where they just have these cooldowns that interact with the game in such a powerful way that with just a bit of game sense you can succeed. Like I know that's got to be a part of the game somewhat, but when that's the top level of the game, then top level players aren't going to be happy. That's just the way it's going to work, and the balance ramifications of that might push the game into being more difficult than people want it to be. But it's what I selfishly want, and what I think the end game of Overwatch is. And the other thing I think is just upgrading the depth of the game with whatever. Like hero pools is a fun thing, but they're not done yet on that journey. Let's put it that way. Like the same problems that are a problem when there's no hero pools are still present there when there are hero pools. In fact, and we don't have time to talk about it. Maybe we'll review another time, SVB. But in some ways, it seems like at the highest tier of competition, hero pools has limited how many things are playable. Actually, having the reverse effect, not in ranked necessarily. Ranked, I think it actually works better personally. But for the pros, it's like they don't have enough time to learn an entirely different thing each time, and they have no control over it. So because of that, they just sort of have to default. Whereas if they had their own bans, they could navigate through and say, okay, like we're loot. If really it should be Huck's system where each map loser picks one ban. It's that simple. That would do so much, because in Valorant, the same strategy can't beat you the whole game, at least not without you having a chance to do something about it. Where like they got Breach running it down mid, stunning you every time. Maybe it works a few rounds in a row, but eventually you should be able to have the tools to deal with that, or to isolate it. Overwatch doesn't really have that, where it's like, this is the best meta, do it all the time until the wheels fall off, and they never do. Whereas if you could ban out, like, okay, they're better at us than us at whatever, what do you got next, right? There's not that aspect to Overwatch where you're forced to do the next thing.
There's a lot of mind games in Valorant.
In Valorant, yeah, totally, right. And that's what makes it interesting. I wish Overwatch would develop that into the game, and maybe that doesn't work for ranked because you have to play a map before you get the ban in that system. But ranked doesn't need them like the pro game does, so they have to kind of figure out which route they want to go.
One of the things I always talk about in a game that I really like to see is the support of all three categories of professional, competitive, and casual, because I think that's what makes a game really healthy. And I think Overwatch kind of failed on all three of those aspects to some extent. They did good to some extent on all of them as well. But what I mean is, like, you want to start at the top professionally and work your way down competitively and casual. You want to have a good competitive or professional scene, players that are making healthy wages for the time invested, a quality balanced game that they can enjoy and that people can enjoy watching. And then competitive level, just the person that plays all day long. They don't play for a living, but they love taking the game seriously. You want to have a healthy ranked environment with lack of cheaters, consistent updates, and bug fixes, stuff like that. And then casual content, you want to have good skins, good map updates, good, just general things that people can enjoy, that you just come home from work and they're like, oh, this is cool, let me play that. I think if you tackle all three of those and you do them well, then Valorant will do a really good job sustaining for more than 5 years.
Yeah. And well, actually, Freedo, what would you say Valorant could learn from Overwatch's trajectory before I give my thoughts?
Yeah, I don't know if I have a great answer that we haven't already said. To be
Well,
honest.
I'll let you think about it at least, and then while I speak on what I think Overwatch can learn from Valorant's release, I think I certainly echo basically what PvP said, where the communication from the Valorant devs has been really, something that the Overwatch devs have lacked. And I think that to bring back my metaphor earlier of the bad partner who's sort of you now realize that they've been mistreating you all this time. I think seeing what Valorant has done suddenly in like the last week, we've seen again moves being made by the Overwatch devs which were a little bit missing earlier. Suddenly they're like, oh, we're gonna look at CC and hey guys, here's some more communication from us, and it feels like at every point they've done that, where like we know we had like 2019 where it was just like the ghost year where they barely talked to us at all, and then at the start of 2020 they were like, sorry guys, we learned our mistakes, we're gonna talk to you some more. And then they did that for like 2 weeks, and then now again they kind of just like ghosted on us again. And it feels like, if I could sum it up, I would say it's complacency. So what I would say is I hope Overwatch stops being complacent. Yet, although I kind of feel like this is the inevitable cycle of Overwatch, they every so often they kind of like, we've done enough, we've satisfied people, we can just like go back to Ghost Town, worry about Overwatch 2 or whatever it is that they're working on, and not be so fussed. Whereas Valorant is quite clearly, it's like the struggle, it's like the grind game. It's like new on the block. It's hungry. It's like, I want to do everything right. I'm going to talk to all the content creators. I'm going to do all the things to make it competitive integrity. I'm just going to like rise up the top of the food chain, as it were, by doing everything right that the people have been asking for. So yeah, I would like to see Overwatch kind of take the warning sign that there are other games around the block that are willing to really listen to their players and really be keyed into what they want. And I hope that the Overwatch devs will kind of, shape up essentially. For Valorant, I would say they just need to, they need to learn that lesson. I think the mistakes Overwatch made was one, taking its community for granted. I think that's never a good sign for a game. I mean, these companies would know better than me. I'm just some random dude in my bedroom, but like, they should know, don't take your player base for granted. That's the number one way to destroy your game, is to do kind of what Overwatch did, which is take your player base for granted and like not implement the changes that they clearly so desperately asked for. So right now, Valorant hasn't done a lot wrong. So, but I would hope for the sake of that game that they don't try and like, take their community for granted, or put their eggs in one basket, like too many eggs in every basket, like Overwatch did, where it's like, casuals come here, like let's have a pros league as well, and like ranked and path to pro, and then none of them actually come out the way they wanted to, except maybe the casuals, who are probably the happiest with Overwatch of the three groups, but even they have their gripes about a lack of PvE and stuff like that.
I mean, Valorant will have its problems coming. It's just inevitable. Like it will have issues. Like it just depends on how they act on those issues, how quickly they act, and how they react. And it should be interesting to see. I have a lot of faith in Riot because they've really impressed me so far with the alpha test and beta test, and just communication and polish. Like the game feels so insanely polished. It is unreal how quality Valorant feels. Like going from like, I mean, to be honest, Overwatch feels insanely polished as well. They have really good in-game voice chat, and there's not many bugs. The bugs usually get fixed pretty quickly. Apex, not even gonna get into it. I can't. I feel like my teammates have microwaves for headsets when I try and talk to them in game. But I completely
it's
forgot
like
what
a year
I was
on
gonna...
and every other game crashes for me. I swear to God.
Yeah, but I was gonna say, I think a downside of Overwatch is that it's such a successful casual game that it's almost like a crutch at the same time, that they don't really need the competitive community to thrive. Like the casuals just carry the weight on the game. It's such a good game, and it's like casuals love Overwatch, and casuals bring in the money, that they could just brush the competitive side to the side, and whatever, they could kind of half-ass it. Whereas Riot with Valorant, it's not a casual focused game. Casuals can play it, and they will play it, and they'll follow the competitive scene and professionals and follow on. But if your competitive and professional scene or aspect fails, the game fails. So they have to be on par with their actions and decision making and everything. They have to be top notch, and they can't slack. They can't lay back and do nothing, or else the game will fail for sure. Or Overwatch, it's still going to be pretty healthy regardless of their decisions, even though it could be so much more than it really is.
Agreed. Interesting point. Like, you take a look at a game like Diablo 3, hardcore players kind of trashed it in a lot of ways. But interestingly enough, it's one of the best-selling games ever, and they released it to consoles and stuff, and it over time they improved it to be amazing. I'm kind of I don't think that's kind of too high of a bar for Overwatch 2, but a similar type of thing could happen if they do a really good job with the PvE, where they can bring those casuals in and hopefully then upgrade the ranked experience to not be for them as well, which is what I feel like it is currently. And from the Valorant perspective, I would say just stay the course with all their things. Like we kind of started the show talking about it a lot, but very clearly they've learned from the entire industry, right? And I think just as long as they continue to do that, they'll be able to dominate their niche. But like PvP said, like the audience they're going for is more fickle and their standards are higher. Whereas a casual player, maybe buys the game and some skins, but doesn't play every day or plays infrequently or gets into it when there's an event or whatever, just to get their loot boxes. Like that's what Overwatch is good at. Valorant, I would hope that it doesn't try to do that too much, honestly.
Yeah.
And just doubles down on what it's actually good at. And as long as they do that, then it'll probably be a success. Whereas Overwatch, it's like I wish it either double down on being casual, like fully, just like we're not gonna pretend like we're gonna have an esport. I would respect it more if it did that. But because they want to have Overwatch League, then I'm like, well, do it right. And we'll see in 6
And that's
months
where you get
or
frustrated.
a year. Yeah, or if they can finish that evolution that they're attempting to go down.
Yeah,
they're like on step 2 of 10 or something, I would say.
Yeah.
of finishing that process.
A little off topic, but for Overwatch 2, the PvE mode, I don't think this is gonna happen, but maybe it will. But I really hope they do some type of like Destiny 2 style like raid. Like the problem with
I think you're right though.
All right, let's just mention like my name's PvP. There's a reason why I call myself PvP because I like to play competitive like person versus person games. I don't like playing PvE games because I think they're boring. I play them for like 3 hours or a day, and I'm just like, okay, I'm just bored. I'm not gonna come back and play this game a week from now. But a game like World of Warcraft, I played PvE extensively. I used to be really good at raiding, and I loved it because it was every week. You challenge yourself. You come back and you compete against this PvE mode, and then next week the same thing, and you progress. Where I think Overwatch 2, if they had some type of really cool like WoW or Destiny 2 rating system, it could be awesome to play every week PvE game mode where you progress and you earn items. And we saw during the BlizzCon we got to play it, Freedo and I, and I don't, no one at home got to play, right? It was only people at BlizzCon, the PvE mode. Yeah, we got to play. It was fun, but seemed like one of those like story mode campaigns that you might play for like a day or a week when it releases, and then you're not going to go back to it. Like, what's the point? But if they have some type of really awesome progression for the PvE mode, I could totally see myself playing that. It would be super fun.
They hinted towards
and grinding
that.
it.
My hope is that what they showed us at BlizzCon is like 10% of it. Like that's what I'm
hoping.
Right? And they've hinted that there's like, there's way more systems, but they haven't shown us anything for me to be like too ambitious for, other than the fact that these are the people that made World of Warcraft and Diablo. So if they put those types of things, that's what they're good at, in my opinion. I mean, that's what they're on the map for. Like me and SVB might gush about StarCraft, but it's World of Warcraft that is the big game. And I didn't play that as a kid. I'm like run around in circles, like I don't know. I couldn't get into it. I like the conflict, like just like you're saying with PvP, like the direct nature of it. But in truth, they do it well. That like when they know how to do that. So my hope for Overwatch 2 is that pops off and then they refocus the PvP to be like more competitive, because it's like, well, there's a place to blow off steam after work, right? It's the grind. You want to play Tracer or Genji every game. There's bots to farm in the PvE mode and get your what could it be like? Really, there's no items, you don't think, other than the little ones you pick up that do stuff. But maybe there's like cosmetic trinkets and sprays and stuff you can get, or things that would transfer PvE to PvP. That would be awesome. Like things like that allow you to just enjoy the very fun and rewarding mechanics that Overwatch has, rather than only having ranked and quick play.
You could have a progression and you could have progression in the power level of your abilities and stuff too. Like it could just be really fun.
Yeah, leveling up, that is a thing, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah,
again,
like because
that
that was like
too deep at the time.
There was definitely like those talent things, right? So we'll see.
Yeah,
but it would be hugely disappointing if it was just a just a campaign essentially. It would be hugely disappointing because it's like, what's the replayability there?
Yeah.
Um,
That's why I was a little annoyed when people talk about Overwatch 2. They'll ask my thoughts. I'm like, the PvE mode is just gonna be like, it seems like it's just gonna be like a 1-day content thing. And like, why are they hyping it up so much? I mean, I understand like PvP, they're adding like new maps, new characters, and maybe a new focus on the game. But I hope the PvE doesn't disappoint.
Yeah, we hope that Blizzard delivers. Yeah, come on, Blizzard. This is what Blizzard is good at. These kind of things is what Blizzard is good at. Maybe like balancing competitively, they're not they haven't shown too much strength in. But this kind of stuff with the cinematics, like they've shown they have a really good finger on the pulse of like designing a narrative, and obviously World of Warcraft designing stuff like raids and Diablo as well. So yeah, with an optimistic eye, we hope that Overwatch 2 will kind of solve a lot of these issues that we've spoken about. But hopefully we gave you guys a good breakdown of Valorant v Overwatch v a little bit of Apex, a little bit of CSGO, what to expect, what it might be, what might be good at, what it might be bad at, whether it's a game for you or not, what kind of stands for the future of both those games. But yeah, other than that, anything else to add, guys, before we sign off?
I could plug my stuff, I guess.
Yeah, plug.
Yes,
Plug
please
away.
do. Please do. Plug. And also, guys, there's a command in Twitch if you type in now, like I've just done. If you exclamation mark PVPX, all his socials will be there. Please do follow, subscribe, everything, all the buttons. Hit them all on PvP stuff.
I guess we never really did like an introduction, just like a 2-second introduction. I started playing Overwatch on console. I moved to PC. I got really high ranked. That's when my Twitch started popping off, and I've been full time for 3 years. I played Overwatch for about 2.5 years, and then I played both Overwatch and Apex. I played Apex professionally, and then as of recent, I've gone to Valorant full time. So I actually am not playing Overwatch, and I'm not playing Apex, but I haven't quit the game permanently. I could see myself going back in the future, but we'll see what happens. But my socials are PVPX on my YouTube and Twitch, and you guys can find my other socials from there. And I hope to see you guys come. If you do, make sure you say you came from here. Let me know.
Let them know, guys. Go tell PvP that you came from the group up call. I it's my bad not introducing you, PvP. I just assumed that everybody would know you. That's the thing. I think everybody does know you. The Overwatch community still
That's okay.
they still hear Junkrat and they think PvP. So I don't think you haven't been forgotten at all. And yeah, thank you so much for joining Freedo and I for the call. It was tons of fun. I think we could probably keep going on and on about all these little intricacies of the games if they let us. But for now, we'll let you guys get going. I'm going to quickly raid our friend Cupcake just to end the stream. But thank you, Freedo. Thank you, PvP. Thank you, everyone who listened. Hopefully you had fun as we did. And catch you guys later.
Thanks for having us.
Bye.